Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari, Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari, Gopi Jana Vallabha Giridhari, Gopi Jana Vallabha Giridhari, Yasodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana, Yasodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana, Jamuna Tira Vanachari, Jamuna Tira Vanachari, Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari, Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari, Gopi Jana Vallabha Giridhari, Gopi Jana Vallabha Giridhari, Yasodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana, Yasodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana, Jamuna Tira Vanachari, Vanachari, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada, Jaya Vishnupada Paramahansa Bhagavacharya Satyashiv Sriman, His Divine Loving Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Goswami Srila Prabhupada ki, Ananta Koi Vaishnavindi ki, Namacharya Haridas Thakur ki, Paramshukaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Shri Gadhar Shri Vasudeva Gaura Bhaktivinoda ki, Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopinath Sambakunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan ki, Vrindavan Dham ki, Mayapur Dham ki, Jagannath Puri Dham ki. All glories to some devotees, all glories to some devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to Shri Guru and Shri Ranga, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Nama Om Vishvadaya Krishna Vastaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namo. Namaste Saraswati Devi Gaurani Vajrayani Namaste Sri Hari Paśyāmi Sadhani. Jai, Hare Krishna. To all the devotees who are there. This evening we are studying the 6th chapter, Jnana Yoga, and we are on verse 33. Arjuna uvāca yoyam yogas tvayā proktaḥ sāmyena Madhusūdana etasyāhaṁ na paśyāmi cañcalatvāt sthitiṁ. Yoyam yogas tvayā proktaḥ sāmyena Madhusūdana etasyāhaṁ na paśyāmi cañcalatvāt sthitiṁ. Yoyam yogas tvayā proktaḥ sāmyena Madhusūdana etasyāhaṁ paśyāmi cañcalatvāt sthirām. And we'll do the word for word. Arjuna uvāca, Arjuna said, Yaham, this system, yoga, mysticism, tvayā, by you, proktaḥ, described, sāmyena, generally, Madhusūdana, O killer of the demon Madhu, etasyāhaṁ, of this, aham, I, na, do not, paśyāmi, see, cañcalatvāt, due to being restless, sthitiṁ, situation, sthirām, stable. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Arjuna said, O Madhusūdana, the system of yoga, which you have summarized, appears impractical and unendurable to me, for the mind is restless and unsteady. Purport. The system of mysticism described by Lord Krishna to Arjuna, beginning with the words Sutra Dese and ending with Yogi Parama, is here being rejected by Arjuna out of a feeling of inability. It is not possible for an ordinary man to leave home and to go to a secluded place in the mountains or jungles to practice yoga in this age of Kali. The present age is characterized by a bitter struggle for a life of short duration. People are not serious about self-realization, even by simple practical means. What to speak of this difficult yoga system, which regulates the mode of living, the matter of sitting, selection of place, and detachment of the mind from material engagement. As a practical man, Arjuna thought it was impossible to follow this system of yoga, even though he was favorably endowed in many ways. He belonged to the royal family and was highly elevated in terms of numerous qualities. He was a great warrior. He had great longevity. And above all, he was the most intimate friend of Lord Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. 5,000 years ago, Arjuna had much better facilities than we do now. Yet he refused to accept this system of yoga. In fact, we do not find any record in history of his practicing it at any time. Therefore, this system must be considered generally impossible in this age of Kali. Of course, it may be possible for some very few rare men, but for the people in general, it is an impossible proposal. If this were so 5,000 years ago, then what of the present day? Those who are imitating this yoga system in different so-called schools and societies, although complacent, are certainly wasting their time. They are completely in ignorance of the desired goal. Yoyam yogas tvayā proktaḥ sāmyena Madhusūdana etasyāhaṁ paśyāmi cañcalatvāt sthirām. Om Agana Timirandasya Jana Jana Salakaya Chakshunmilitam yena tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadanmayam Dadanti Svapadantikam. Ye Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagapati Gopisa Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namosute. Om Mahabalanaya Krishna Prema Padayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namani Gorjashe Namaha. Tapta Kanchana Gorange Radhe Vindavaneshwari Vishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye. Vanchakapatruvyaschā kripa sindhu bevacha patitanam pavanevyo vaishnavevyo namo namaha. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhaktavinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So, Arjuna said, O Madhusūdana, the system of yoga which you have summarized appears impractical and unendurable to me, for the mind is restless and unsteady. Krishna, since the beginning of this chapter, has been describing all the way up to this last verse 32, this yoga process as recommended for the age of Satya Yuga. There are 4 yugas, like the earth goes through seasons. We have spring, summer, fall, winter. So similarly, the universe goes through different yugas. And these yugas are marked by very large differences between them. Satya Yuga, for example, is mostly in Satyagun. It's mostly in the mode of goodness. People are all interested in becoming God conscious. The lifespan is 100,000 years of life. And the process has been described by Krishna for attaining self-realization. The next yuga, Treta Yuga, the lifespan drops to 10,000 years, which is still very significant. And approximately 75% of the population is interested in becoming God conscious. The recommended process for becoming self-realized in Treta Yuga is sacrifice. Not ordinary sacrifices. It requires a great deal of facility and a great expense for these sacrifices. They also involved animals, but not like the Kali Yuga animal sacrifices. No, these animals regained a fresh young body. But they're forbidden in this age because this age we don't have brahmanas that can properly pronounce these mantras, and that's key to them being successful, these sacrifices being successful. So we don't have facility to even dream of these sacrifices in this age. And then this Dwarka Yuga. Now, Krishna appeared in Dwarka Yuga. Arjuna was born in Dwarka Yuga. And this is over 5,000 years ago. The recommended process for self-realization at that time was deity worship. And Srila Prabhupada described this deity worship by telling us that if he instituted this type of deity worship, we would all faint. Because again, this requires a great amount of expense and facility that we just don't have. The lifespan in Dwarka Yuga is 1,000 years, which is significantly more than what we have in Kali Yuga. Kali Yuga, if you live to be 100 years old, you're considered a very, very old man. And generally speaking, a 100-year-old person is very feeble and is not too comfortable in that material body. Very few people are interested in self-realization. And that the recommended process in Kali Yuga is Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And the Sankirtan movement. And this is the process of self-realization in Kali Yuga. So what is self-realization? Self-realization is understanding who we are. Nitya Siddha Krishna Das, eternal servants of Krishna. And what does that mean? As we are eternal servants of Krishna, that we are here for pleasing Krishna. And our pleasure is derived from serving and pleasing Krishna and his transcendental senses. To be a servant in Kali Yuga or any time is, to anyone, is not considered a very desirable post. And people try their best not to be a servant of anyone, rather to be the controller and enjoyer. But if we look closely, we will see that everyone is serving someone. It's our natural position to serve. Well, you look carefully, and even the greatest leader in society, you'll see they're serving their family, they're serving their society. They may be, someone may be serving their boss, or they may be serving their cats and dogs. It's our nature to serve. This is who we are. We are servants. And understanding our eternal relationship with Krishna, that he is the enjoyer, and our pleasure is giving him enjoyment. This has to be done with complete free will and with a loving spirit in order to really have any effect or positive results. Arjuna was certainly not an ordinary personality. Of course, his mother is a great queen, Kunti. His father was the Lord Indra, the king of heavens, a demigod. And so his mind, his body, his intelligence was exceptional, way beyond our experiences today. As I understand that people back then were 12 feet tall. And among the Pandavas, Arjuna was renowned. He was probably one of the best, if not the best outside of Krishna and Balaram, warriors of the time. When he was very, very young, he excelled in martial arts at the academy that was led by Dronacharya. But the most important quality, the most enduring quality about Arjuna is his intimate, close friendship with Krishna. That was probably the most wonderful thing about Arjuna. When he was a young student, they'd shortly had completed their studies under Dronacharya. Duryodhana and his wicked brothers had arranged a vacation for the Pandavas and their mother to, I believe it was the Ganges, the shore of the Ganges. They built a house, not an ordinary house. This house was built to burn up very quickly. Not only that, this had containers, vats of oil that was highly, highly flammable. So once fire and heat got close to it, they would explode, and it would go very, very quickly. Of course, Vidura warned the Pandavas, and Yudhishthira made arrangements for their escape. And after they escaped, though, they didn't know exactly what to do because they were new young princes. They really had no allies. They didn't have any political, and to go back and face the Kurus could be devastating. So they didn't know exactly what to do. So they went into hiding incognito. Actually, at the same time, another great personality, Draupadi, who was born from a fire sacrifice, completely qualified and so beautiful that anyone who looked at her, any man who looked at her wanted to marry her And she had always had her heart set on marrying Arjuna. So for her Swayambhara ceremony, she arranged a contest that she was certain that only Arjuna could complete. And but there was this rumor that the Pandavas and their mother were all killed in this fire. And somehow she went on. She didn't quite believe that. And so when she had this Swayambhara ceremony, all the princes came from all over. Duryodhana, his brothers, they came and they competed and they failed. It was very difficult. There was a fish attached high up on the ceiling. And in front of the fish was a wheel spinning around and around and around. On the ground was a pool of water. And the contestant, they had to look into the water and shoot their arrow to pierce the eye of the fish. So many great princes applied and failed. But then there was this Brahmana. Now, I often wonder how this disguise went for the Pandavas to disguise themselves as Brahmanas. It must have been very interesting because the Kshatriyas have very different bodies than Brahmanas. And so somehow or another, Arjuna fooled them and he comes up. First of all, before he came up, Karna came. Now, Karna, we know is the son of Kunti, but he didn't even know that at the time. He thought he was a son of a Sudra, but he had the body and the mentality of a Kshatriya, and he had attained all kinds of abilities of Kshatriya and also archer abilities. So he was considered Arjuna's main competition. When Draupadi saw this, she wouldn't allow him to compete. And she used the excuse that he was born of a lower caste. And Karna held this against her for the rest of his life. But when Arjuna stepped up and he accomplished this feat, everyone was shocked. They didn't know quite what to think or what to do. And before anyone could think anymore, they took Draupadi and the 5 brothers left immediately the arena. So Arjuna was extremely qualified. And his most important qualification was his friendship with Krishna. However, when Krishna started speaking to him on the battle of Kurukshetra, this relationship transformed. And Krishna became the guru and Arjuna the disciple. And here, Arjuna is presenting himself in a very excellent example, a great example as a disciple. He's presenting himself as in a humble state of mind. Most people, when they want to talk about themselves, they only want to talk about what they've achieved and what they're good at. But Srila Prabhupada, he's instructed us that before the spiritual master, we appear as fool number 1 in a humble state of mind. So Arjuna is saying, I can't do this. It's unendurable. My mind is too uncontrollable. It's impossible. So another good example of someone who approached their spiritual master who had extreme wonderful qualities is Srila Rupa Goswami and Srila Sanatana Goswami. And they were amazing personalities. They came from a great caste of Brahmanas, but they were Vaishnavas too. They were forced to work for a Muslim leader. And in doing so, they lost so much honor and respect, but that didn't stop them. Where they lived, they arranged to have facility and invited Brahmanas, Vaishnavas, and scholars to come and discuss Srimad Bhagavatam. They were great Vaishnavas. Srila Sanatana Goswami, the deities were Radha Madhava. And so when they met Lord Chaitanya, they had such a humble state of mind. They considered themselves lower than Jagai and Madhai. They compared themselves approaching Lord Chaitanya to a dwarf touching the moon. And so they begged for his causeless mercy. If we think we are eligible for causeless mercy, then this is our disqualification. It's not easy to attain causeless mercy. When we first come to spiritual life, we may think we're so advanced. Oh, look at me do this service. I can do this, I can do that. And we think we're so advanced. And this is the uncontrolled mind that is thinking like this. If we think, oh, look at me engaged and enthusiastically, and these other devotees are doing nothing. Well, what are we? We are really nothing. Because after some time, if a devotee is sincerely applying and sincerely chanting, they actually develop a real sense of humility. That sense of humility is honestly understanding who we are and how insignificant and unimportant and useless we are. This takes honest introspection, which is a very important feature in making development in devotional life. And I knew a devotee came and told me one time how she was a head pujari. And she'd get up at 2:00 in the morning. She'd wake the deities. She'd do artik. She'd dress the deities. She would go on to make Raj Bhog. She did so much service. And one day she couldn't do any more. She could hardly get out of bed in the morning. And this is interesting because we aren't doing anything. Any ability we think we might have, any qualities we think we're endowed with, are coming from Krishna. And it's only by his mercy that we have them. And so we should never take these things too lightly or think that we are actually the doer or the controller. It's only by the blessings of Guru and Krishna that we have any abilities at all. So Arjuna is speaking here as an excellent example. And he is complaining. He says, I can't control my mind. My mind is obstinate. It's turbulent. It's impractical and unendurable. And when we read the prayers of great acharyas like Narottam Das Thakur and Srila Bhakti Vinod Thakur, their prayers reflect this sentiment. And this is because they really believe this. They really believe they are the most fallen, even though they are the most elevated. But their prayers are like a child crying out for its mother who has no hope for, nothing else will satisfy. And they're crying out for Krishna in these beautiful prayers. If we want to judge our advancement in Krishna consciousness, if we want to have some way of evaluating our hearts, we should look and see, are they becoming any softer? Do tears come to our eyes when we go to chant the holy name? Oh, are we developing any more compassion for the fallen conditioned souls? One unifying factor amongst Prabhupada disciples is that when they talk about Srila Prabhupada, they always talk about his extreme compassion. It just being in the presence of somebody with that much compassion, it melts our hearts. So is our compassion increasing? And what are our motives in Krishna consciousness? Are we thinking about our fame, our name, the adoration we can achieve? Or are we thinking about how to please Krishna's senses? The great Arjuna said, it's more difficult to control than the wind in the next verse. And when Krishna performs his divine pastimes, there's many different levels of these pastimes, many different lessons and understanding. So who are we to control the wind, right? When in America, they call this hurricane season. Every year, these huge, gigantic windstorms blow into the country in certain areas. And when they blow into the country, they bring a great amount of water, sometimes miles of water come pouring into the country. And the wind, they sometimes have stories about people preparing or trying to prepare for these terrible storms. They're called hurricanes. And they you see they're putting big planks of plywood over windows. They're putting tarps and bolting them down deep into the ground over roofs. And they try to do so much facility, but there's very little they can do. And once this storm hits, they're all hiding in the basement. They have to hide because it's treacherous. If you're out in this, everything's blowing around. Trees are being uprooted. Whole roofs are being torn off of houses. It's amazing. You see trucks being turned over and trailers being thrown, half a mile away. It's uncanny. And afterwards, the destruction is immense. This is like the uncontrolled mind. The uncontrolled mind can do such devastation. The uncontrolled mind can destroy families. It can destroy friendships. It can destroy all our pious activities. So controlling the mind is definitely an important feature. It's an important factor in devotional life. And Krishna, he promises, he says, Name Bhakta Panasyati, that my devotee never perishes. But Krishna is not talking about the material body, nor is he concerned about our material bodies. What he's talking about is our spiritual standing. And so to really take shelter of Krishna, when Srila Prabhupada has explained that when Maya attacks, chant Hare Krishna very loudly. So Krishna was just over a year old, and Mother Yasoda, she was holding him, and he became a bit heavy, so she set him down to play. And then all of a sudden, this terrible windstorm by the name of Trinavarta, who was sent by Kamsa, came into Vrindavan. And he brought darkness. He blacked out the sun. It couldn't see anything, and so much wind. There was so much wind and so much destruction that Mother Yasoda, her only anxiety, this is the anxiety of a pure devotee, is what about my son? What about Krishna and his welfare? She's only concerned about him. And she's running around trying to find him, and then becomes overwhelmed in Vikalambar Seva and falls on the ground, unconscious, unable to even move. But all the other residents in Vrindavan are searching for Krishna. Where's Krishna? Where's Krishna? Well, Krishna is being taken by this demon high up in the sky. Our little Krishna, Yogeshwar, he can become lighter than the lightest or heavier than the heaviest. And he's holding on to this demon by the neck. And so he starts to become very heavy. And the demon starts losing altitude and he starts to fall. So he thinks he's going to push this Krishna off, right? I can get him off of here, because if I don't, I'm going to fall to the ground. But he can't get Krishna off. So this demon is like an uncontrolled mind. The uncontrolled mind, he wants to push Krishna out. He wants to replace it with ignorance and darkness. And but Krishna will protect the devotee who endeavors and lets him protect him. And by letting him protect him, that means he's following the process that's given by Guru, Shastra, and sadhus. So Arjuna is asking Madhusūdana, he's saying, Madhusūdana, please conquer my mind. Madhusūdana is the name of Krishna in a previous yuga. The first demons that showed up were Madhu and Caitana. And Madhusūdana killed them. He appeared with a horse head and a golden body. And he enlivened all the devotees by killing this demon. The mind afraid. Yes, the mind chanting sincerely, hearing very carefully the holy name, that this is the process in this age that we can actually reach self-realization. Our lives are short, our intelligence is small, and our minds are weak. So these elaborate yoga processes are not recommended. And that the process which is more effective is bhakti yoga. At the same time, we need to know that the enemy is the mind, and that we need to that this is good. This will help control the mind. But sometimes our intelligence is strong, but the mind is even stronger, and the senses are so powerful they can overrun us. But there's no artificial means other than chanting Hare Krishna that will save us. Sometimes new devotees have a particularly difficult time because they'll all of a sudden they have anger issues, or they have frustration they've never felt before. And this is because the mind and the senses are not intoxicated and dulled by so much sense gratification. And because they are like raw, and they are agitated because they're not getting their usual level of sense gratification. So we have to be patient, and we have to endure sometimes some challenging situations, and watch out for these challenges and tests. In the scriptures, there's this great analogy. And in the Los Angeles temple, they have a museum. It's quite popular. It's open to the public. It's called the Bhagavad Gita Museum. And one of the displays is really a great display. It's a chariot with a passenger sitting in the chariot. The passenger is going like this. And and on the chariot is a driver and the reins. And then the horse represents one of the senses. There's 5 horses. And each sense wants to run in a different direction at the same time. And the reins are not being used to hold in the horses. And the mind is meant to control the senses. And how the senses are controlled by the mind. To rein them in, and the driver has to do this. The driver is the intelligence. So you and I, we're just the passengers, but we can tell the driver what to do. So Arjuna, who was born in a previous age with so many godly qualities, and he could not see himself applying this yoga process. And so what to say of us? And I know it's really popular right now, so many meditation techniques and stuff. But really, if people are honest, they'll see that they don't really have a positive effect, these meditation techniques. That the only process that really helps in this age is chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. But it's not enough just for us to chant for ourselves. We have to also do something to help spread this movement, because this is really endearing and very give them a book and let them take this book home. And in that way, they can actually read the words of a very dear friend of Krishna's, Srila Prabhupada, and come to some real understanding. And Srila Prabhupada, when he first came to America and he stayed in Butler, Pennsylvania, he would go to the different churches and he talked to a lot of people. And he didn't do all the talking. Prabhupada was like interviewing people and trying to understand how to preach to this Western world. Govinda Dasi told me when she first met Prabhupada, she felt like she was on a job interview because he asked her so many personal questions like, how much education do you have? Do you drive? Can you swim? All these questions. And she was a little surprised about these questions, but it turns out that he was questioning and trying to understand. When we meet someone interested in Krishna consciousness, we should question them and find out what's attracted them, what's brought them to Krishna consciousness, and make sure they get a book to take home. The book will do so much greater good. We used to call them in the old days time bombs. And there was this one devotee. He was out before he became a devotee. He was out in the street and he had got a Bhagavad Gita somehow or another. He bought one on the street and he brought it home and he put it on his bookshelf and he forgot about it. And then in front of his bookshelf, he had his weights and he was, I guess, a bodybuilder. And he's laying on this bench, pushing up this, I don't know what it's called, but he's pushing up these weights, very heavy thing. And somehow or another, he lost his balance. And the thing fell into the bookcase and the whole bookcase started to fall down on top of him, but it stopped. It was stopped. So he jumps up to look to see what stopped the bookcase from falling on him and maybe really hurting him. And it was the Bhagavad Gita. And so he thought, wow, this book just saved my life. Maybe I should read it. And subsequently, he became a devotee. And practice. And detachment is interesting. Detachment's like a two-sided coin. For devotees, it's like a two-sided coin. For the impersonalists, it's a one-sided coin. So there is the detachment from everything material, that we have to become detached from all this material misery. Prabhupada says the biggest problem we have is our attachment to material miseries. But on the other side of that coin is using things in Krishna's service. So we can use whatever we can use in Krishna's service. That's the perfection of that thing. That's our cleverness, and that's very good. Prabhupada encouraged that very much. So we have to see how everything can be used in Krishna's service, and that how we can stay engaged in Krishna's service. But be wary of the mind, because the mind is not really our friend. We have to be careful around the mind. It will mislead us, misguide us. It could wreak spiritual havoc if we let it. So we need to be very careful with the mind, but we need to take this process very seriously if we're going to have any positive effect on this wretched mind. So I'm going to end here. And if anybody would like to ask a question or a comment or say anything at all. Okay.
Thank you very much. If anyone has a question or a comment, you can unmute and ask, or you can write on the chat box.
Hare Krishna Mataji.
Hare Krishna.
Mataji, you explained that Arjuna could able to pierce the eye of the fish, and
I'm not hearing anything.
Yeah, now you stopped.
here he's asking that he can. So why it is concentrate?
Why did Arjuna concentrate?
Why Arjuna was expressing his inability to fix his mind on yoga?
Oh, why? Because was, even though he had so many qualities and so many abilities, he was not a yogi. And this is a process for a previous age. And I think he was expressing, especially for our benefit, for the people who come in the next age in Kali Yuga and behind him, is that our qualities, our abilities are diminishing. Each generation is diminishing. So Arjuna is seeing that, yeah, this yoga process was really good in Satya Yuga, but Srila Prabhupada says in the purport, there's no history of Arjuna ever being involved in any kind of meditation or yoga. It was not something that he did for his spiritual life. Does that answer your question?
Thank you, Mataji. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Okay. Well,
Okay.
we can end here. Thank you very much. We'll take shelter.
Thank you
of
very much.
Prabhupada's lotus feet.
Jai. Jai
Hare
Shri
Krishna.
Prabhupada. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.